Well, welcome to our series of classes for not just young couples, but really any couples, married couples, engaged and dating couples, whatever situation you might find yourself in. Hopefully, in this class, we will be able to move forward in our relationships, do a better job, glorify God in a better way, be more like Christ. The the Bible describes Christians and Christ as having a similar relationship to, or a parallel relationship to, wives and husbands, and so it's quite important that we come to grasp the meaning of being in a relationship, the meaning of marriage, the deep the depths of meaning that are related to a married couple, husband and wife, like Christ and the church. Really quite amazing and quite deep. Now, in this class, we're going to go through a lot of different categories, a lot of different subjects. I'll go ahead and pull up the class outline. You can see that I, along with Jason Hoeflich, are teaching most of the classes. There is a week where we're both going to be gone, and Ron Spangler is going to step in, and I would not be surprised if Ron ends up teaching a few more of these classes if we have some things, some conflicts, or if there are some topics that he wants to jump into. But this is the schedule as it stands right now, and today is really an introductory kind of lesson, but do want to touch on this concept of intimacy. It is very, very important, and we're not talking here necessarily sexual intimacy. You'll see on April 28th, we'll be going through a lesson on the sexual part of a marriage relationship. But this is more emotional, maybe even spiritual, if you want to look at it that way. But the whole idea of letting someone into our lives, and of course, with our husbands and wives, that is vitally important. And as one is dating, as one is in an engaged relationship, of course, those different levels of intimacy are developing, the closeness is growing, and we hopefully will be continuing in that direction through our lives. Now, something that's really, really important as we do a class on marriage is that we realize that there's no marriage to look at, a human marriage. There's no marriage to look at here on this earth that is perfect. And so as we go through these things, will be talking about communication, and there are ways in which that ideally a couple would communicate, but there are many couples that don't communicate in the ideal way, but it's sufficient and good and keeps their marriage strong the way that they handle things. And so we just have to recognize that all of us pray differently in our relationship with God. We all have different nuances. We all have different ways that we experience that and do that. And the same is true in marriage. Back in the 60s, 70s, maybe even into the 80s a little bit, there were marriage seminars and marriage conferences, things going on, and they were finding that people would attend these conferences and the divorce rate would actually go up. And so what they quickly corrected is the idea that there's some ideal way in which everything needs to work, because the conference or the seminar would put forward this perfect marriage, and people would leave feeling so guilty, these husbands and wives. Well, we don't have sex as often as that couple, or we don't talk as much as that couple. We don't experience our love in that way. We don't treat our kids in exactly that way. I mean, and it caused a lot of guilt and a lot of frustration and a lot of depression. So we definitely will not do that. And like I said, that was quickly corrected. People realized there isn't just this one perfect couple that everyone can look at, even though that perfect couple was kind of created for those seminars and those conferences. But there is not a perfect way to do it. And well, there might be, ideally, if we were not in a sinful fallen world and we were not sinful and fallen people, but the way in which couples relate and do their marriage, so to speak, is different across the board. We will not find two couples ever that do it exactly the same way. It just will not exist. So with all these things, they are suggestions, and sometimes they will be ideals from Scripture. Well, this is how it should be. We all recognize that it's not going to be exactly that, but this is the ideal set forth. The same is true with the church, and we don't freak out when God's body, when our congregation does not handle something exactly, where every part is not handling something exactly. We don't freak out and run away. And so the same should be true in our marriages. If Jennifer and I don't handle something perfectly, i.e. everything, but if there's a certain thing where we're not handling it as well as we think we should, well, we're not going to run, obviously. We're going to work on that. And that's what the inventories that we filled out, that's what this class is all about. Let's just try to do better. Let's try to grow. The commitment that we have to our spouses is critical in this, because we're going to find out, you know what, I don't love as much as I probably should, and I don't forgive as much as I probably should, and I don't communicate as well as I probably should, and I'm not one with my wife the way I probably should be, and I don't always handle conflict resolution the way I should, and finances and leisure activities and sex and family and friends and spiritual beliefs and roles and responsibilities, right on down the list. We're not going to handle any of these perfectly. We can grow in every single one of them. And I think that's really, really important for us to recognize. Now, I don't know if I'll quote from this book the rest of the quarter, but I do want to emphasize it today in this first lesson. Mike Mason is a guy that was going to become a Catholic priest, and he fell in love, and so at the time that happened, you could not be a priest and be married, and so he did not become a priest. But he wrote a book on marriage called The Mystery of Marriage, and it is definitely my favorite on marriage. The subtitle used to be As Iron Sharpens Iron, from Proverbs 27:17. When it got to the 20th anniversary of the book and they put out a new edition, the subtitle, as you can see, became Meditations on the Miracle, and that is fine as well. But Proverbs 27:17 says, as you can see, as iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. In other words, there's a little bit of grit, there's a little bit of conflict, there's a little bit of rubbing, there's a little bit of, when you sharpen something, there's a little bit of aggression and stuff that's going on there. But that's how it kind of happens in marriage, and we can expand that to be any kind of relationship. As iron sharpens iron, so one person sharpens another. We help each other. We strive to move each other along. If one person in the marriage is in a spiritual trough, so to speak, and the other person's on a spiritual high, the person that's spiritually strong at the moment can help lift up the one who's spiritually weak, and vice versa. For Jennifer and I, we always hope that, or I should say for Jennifer and me, we always hope that we're not both in a trough at the same time. That, although in a microcosm kind of way, it can happen in a day. We both might be hungry, we both might be tired, we both might be a little snippy, and so both, so to speak, in a little bit of a trough, but hopefully a little food and a little rest can bring us out of those. But you know what I'm talking about. Sometimes in life, well, I shouldn't just say sometimes, we are constantly going up and down in our lives. We have strong periods, we have weaker periods. Hopefully, even in the weaker periods, we're strong in the Lord and we stay committed to Him, and as well to our spouses, of course. Well, when Mike Mason decided to write this book, he approached a friend and said that he was going to use this verse as kind of the theme verse for a book on marriage. And the friend said, well, what in the world are you going to do with the verses that are prior to this verse? 15 and 16 say, a quarrelsome wife is like the dripping of a leaky roof in a rainstorm. Restraining her is like restraining the wind or grasping oil with the hand. Well, obviously, the Bible is, as Mike Mason will point out, is coarse. And he relates this story, and I'm going to read a teeny bit of this beginning of this book. So, as I've already related to you, when I first proposed to a friend the initial 4 words of a verse from Proverbs as the basis for a book on marriage, he wanted to know what I planned to say about the verses that immediately preceded. A quarrelsome wife is like a constant dripping on a rainy day. Restraining her is like restraining the wind or grasping oil with the hand. The Bible is such a tactless book, isn't it? So coarse in places, so unkind and indelicate, so deeply unromantic. But surely marriage is also a tactless affair, full of awkwardness and indelicacy, as unromantic at times as a sink full of dirty dishes. Whether one's mate happens to be a quarrelsome creature or not, marriage still has an uncanny knack for creating a more or less constant dripping in one's life. It is not all smooth sailing in a cloudless sky. Nevertheless, a beleaguered spouse will do well to bear in mind an observation of Jeremy Taylor's that a husband must learn to tolerate his wife's infirmities because in doing so he either cures her or makes himself better. These remarks, needless to say, must apply equally to husbands as to wives. Despite the caustic comments sprinkled throughout the Proverbs about shrewish wives, it is with a sustained paean to marital bliss that the book ends. A wife of noble character, who can find? She is worth far more than rubies. Her husband has full confidence in her and lacks nothing of value. Proverbs 31, 10, and 11. In other words, the book of Proverbs as a whole takes a view of marriage that remains proverbial to this day, that there is nothing in the world worse than a bad marriage, and at the same time, nothing better than a good one. And that, in some ways, is the whole message of biblical theology. For throughout the Bible, marriage is employed as the most sublime metaphor for the relationship between man and God. Paul, as we have noted, resorted to this picture to describe the loving union between Christ and his church. But the Old Testament prophets also used marriage as the plainest and most transparent example of the type of covenant love the Lord has for his people. And Jesus told parables in which a wedding feast became the symbolic setting for the coming of the kingdom. A good Christian marriage, indeed, is more than a religious metaphor. It is a first tangible and visible and most glorious fruit of the kingdom of God. A wedding was not only the occasion for the first miracle of Jesus, it was, after creation itself, God's own first miracle. He brought the woman to the man. Genesis 2:22. Marriage certainly is unbelievably positive, and it can be unbelievably negative at times. God uses the negative to show the unfaithfulness of Israel. God being the husband and Israel being the unfaithful wife, sleeping around, basically, is what, well, we literally have that in Hosea, as we have a picture of that happening. But Israel constantly being described as the unfaithful one, and just incredible. But at the same time, the church, God's people, are the bride of Christ. Oftentimes at weddings, I'll use this short little snippet from the book of Proverbs as well. This is right before the great chapter on the virtuous wife. Proverbs 30, 19, 18, and 19. Three things are beyond me, four I can't understand. The way of an eagle in the sky, the way of a snake on a rock, the way of a ship at sea, and the way of a man with a young woman. It's incredible the blessing that we have in marriage, the blessing that we have in every aspect of it, the sexual aspect of it, the closeness aspect of it. I remember when Jennifer and I were dating, we could not wait until, and of course there was the looking forward to the sexual relationship, but at the same time it was, we wanted to be together as much as we could, so we would be together, we'd spend an evening together, go out, do whatever we were doing, but then we had to go to our separate places. Jennifer would go home, I would go home, and we were tired of that. We just wanted to be able to lay down in a bed together and go to sleep together. We just wanted to be together. The blessings are tremendous. The blessings are beyond measure. And we should be willing and wanting to bless our spouses. And so as we move through this whole quarter, the idea will be improvement for the marriage, but as we improve self, we improve the marriage. We don't need to try to change the other person. We need to try to improve ourselves and bless the other person in the relationship. It reminds me of Aaron's blessing. Um, the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to Aaron and his sons, saying, Thus shall you bless the people of Israel. You shall say to them, The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. So shall they put my name upon the people of Israel, and I will bless them." Well, just as Aaron and his sons were to bless the people of Israel in this way, obviously we should be blessing each other, but even more so, blessing our spouses. I should want the Lord to bless Jennifer and keep her. And I should want the Lord to make his face to shine upon her and be gracious to her. And I should want the Lord to lift up his countenance upon her and give her peace. Well, a lot of times God blesses people through other people. I need to be the main conduit for this. I am the main person in her life. And she should be the same for me. And I believe we are, hopefully most of the time, but we can do better. At this point in the lesson, and kind of leaning into this idea of us blessing our spouses, also wanted us to recognize the fact that sometimes people, even in a marriage, are lonely. And I shared in the class, the live class, some of the times I've felt guilty about that, maybe leaving Jennifer kind of alone at times. And not necessarily just physically, like when I was off on a mission trip or doing something with other people concerning church work, but just in general, just kind of being so socialized at some points in my life that I didn't want any more socialization. And so, not on purpose and not being mean, but I feel sometimes I did not open myself up to Jennifer the way I should have. And maybe we have many who have done that. So, this a video I showed in one of our other classes here at the congregation a few weeks ago kind of hit me that we could have husbands and wives at our church that are very, very lonely, even though they have a husband or wife living right there in the house with them. So on YouTube, on this recording of the video, I cannot show this YouTube video. It would be hit for copyright violations. I could do it in the live class, of course. I own the rights to the video, but I can't do it in this recorded class. So I'm encouraging all of you, pause this video and go to open up another window in YouTube and watch this video, because this is what we watched at this point in the class. And all you should really have to do, go to YouTube or some other video service and search Lonely People, Igniter Media, church video. You can see at the bottom of the picture there, that's what they have up, Igniter Media, for this particular video. It's the song Lonely People playing in the background, and it gives you little snippets of people's stories. And just the fact, this statement here, life will bring pain, hurt, and brokenness, that's one of the first statements on the video. And then at the end, though, the encouragement is to remember that Jesus has overcome the world. And so John 16:31-33 says, Jesus answered them, "Do you finally believe? In fact, you're about to make a run for it, saving your own skins and abandoning me. But I'm not abandoned. The Father is with me. I've told you all this so that trusting me, you'll be unshakable and assured, deeply at peace. In this godless world, you will continue to experience difficulties, but take heart. I've conquered the world." So absolutely incredible statement from Jesus, recognizing what was about to happen, but at the same time, recognizing God the Father was with Jesus, God the Son. And so getting more into this idea of intimacy, we want to be close to each other emotionally. And this is different for everyone. This is another case where sometimes we see couples and there's just no, that maybe they're both extroverted or they're both introverted, or one's one way and another's the other way, but they still just have a way of just always seeming to be connected, always so close. And some of us may look at that and we might just be, oh, man, I just don't feel that same thing. Well, again, every couple is different. We're going to talk a lot about communication, even though there's one particular week labeled communication. We're going to talk a lot about conflict resolution, but I'll tell you, communication is key in every single one of these. It's key when we look at finances. It's key when we look at the sexual relationship. It's key when we talk about roles and responsibilities. It's key everywhere. We've got to be talking. And so if either of the individuals in your relationship want a little more emotional intimacy, you need to speak up. That's what needs to happen. It just needs to be, I feel like we could do better. And then again, focus on self rather than the other person. Focus on what you can do to bless your partner and to make the intimacy move in the direction that you want it to move in. I'll just tell you right now, there's not going to be one aspect of marriage that's going to be perfect in this life. We will, if we're married 60 years, we'll still be able to do better. We'll still be able to love a little bit more. We'll still be able to do all the things in 1 Corinthians 15, the things concerning our personal manifestation of the fruit of the Spirit from Galatians chapter 5. We will always be able to do better. So never think you've arrived and never get depressed if you haven't arrived, because you're not going to in this life. We can always do better. And then I opened it up a little bit in the live class for a teeny bit of talk about letting other people in to our lives. And of course, ultimately, the person we need to let in is our spouse. And some of us have a tendency to be a little too private, even in our own homes. We need to let other people in. The Bible talks a lot about, whether it's in a marriage or in the community of God's people, whatever the setting might be, about being real, not being hypocrites, not being hidden. God wants us to be totally transparent, totally open, and we do need to let our spouses into our lives. And this is no matter what. We're supposed to love our enemies even. So we're supposed to be loving other people. This is a passage that I think about sometimes concerning people that might be frustrating in a church setting or a business setting, whatever kind of setting. We urge you, brothers, admonish the idle. That just means the lazy, people not working. Encourage the faint-hearted, help the weak, be patient with them all. And I think that's really the key, is the last statement. Sometimes if someone's lazy, we're not very patient with that. And sometimes if someone's weak, we're not very patient with that. Faint-hearted, I think if someone's discouraged, really is what that's getting. I think we're more patient with that. We do want people to be encouraged. We want people to be lifted up, I think, typically. But Paul says to the people in Thessalonica, be patient with them all. No matter what they're dealing with, be patient with them. Of course, this applies in the family. This applies in marriage. Love is patient. The very first one listed is patience. If we love our spouses, we're going to be patient with them. And then I do want to read one more section from the book. Like I said at the beginning, I don't know if I'll read from this particular book the rest of the whole quarter, but there are a lot of great things in this book. And I love this statement on intimacy. You can see it starts on page 71, but the idea of two into one. And once again, this is from Mike Mason's book, The Mystery of Marriage. Marriage is the closest bond that is possible between two human beings. That at least was the original idea behind it. It was to be something unique, without parallel or precedent. In the sheer sweep and radical abandon of its commitment, it was to transcend every other form of human union on earth, every other covenant that could possibly be made between two people. Friendship, parent-child, master-pupil. Marriage would surpass all these other bonds in a whole constellation of remarkable ways, including equality of the partners, permanent commitment, cohabitation, sexual relations, and the spontaneous creation of blood ties through simple spoken promises. As it was originally designed, marriage was a union to end all unions, the very last word, and the first in human intimacy. Socially, legally, physically, emotionally, every which way. There is just no other means of getting closer to another human being, and never has been, than in marriage. Such extraordinary closeness is bought at a cost, and the cost is nothing more nor less than one's own self. No one has ever been married without being shocked at the enormity of this price and at the monstrous inconvenience of this thing called intimacy, which suddenly invades their life. At the wedding, a bride and groom may have gone through the motions of the candle lighting ceremony. Little aside here, back when this was written, that was a very big deal. Almost every wedding, there would be a unity candle. Jennifer and I did that at our ceremony. Some of you listening to this and watching this video won't even know what that is, but that's the idea is that the couple, they each take their own candle, they light a central candle to show the unity, the bringing together of the two, and then they blow out the original candles. And when I was doing weddings, I'd tell the couples, don't blow out your candle toward the big middle candle because you're likely to blow it out too. And that's not a good sign, right? So anyway, so at the wedding, a bride and groom may have gone through the motions of the candle lighting ceremony, each blowing out their own flame and lighting one central candle in place of the two. But the touching simplicity of this ritual has little in common with the actual day-to-day pressures involved, as two persons are merged into one. It is a different matter when the flame that must be extinguished is no lambent flicker of a candle, but the blistering inferno of self-will and independence. There is really nothing else like this lifelong cauterization of the ego that must take place in marriage. All of life is, in one way or another, humbling, but there's nothing like the experience of being humbled by another person and by the same person day in and day out. It can be exhausting, unnerving, infuriating, disintegrating. There's no suffering like the suffering involved in being close to another person. And I'm really glad that Mason had a but here. If you stop right there, it's like, oh man, I don't know if I want to get married. But neither is there any joy nor any real comfort at all outside of intimacy, outside the joy and the comfort that are wrung out like wine from the crush and ferment of two lives being pressed together. What happens to a couple when they fall in love, when they pitch headlong into this wine press of intimacy, is not simply that they are swept off their feet. More than that, it is the very ground they are standing on, the whole world and ground of their own separate selves that is swept away. A person in love cannot help becoming, in some sense, a new person. After all, even to stand for 5 minutes beside a stranger in a supermarket lineup without exchanging one word is to be drawn irresistibly, uncomfortably, enigmatically into the dizzying vortex of another human life. It is to be subtly swayed, held, hypnotized, transfixed, moved and influenced in a myriad of ways, subliminal and seldom analyzed, but nonetheless potent. But marriage takes the same imponderable magnetism and raises it to an infinite power. The very next step in human closeness beyond marriage would just be to scrap the original man and woman and create one new human being out of the two. But this is exactly what happens, both in symbol and in actuality, in the birth of a child. Eventually, the parents die, leaving the child a living sign of the unthinkable extremity of union which took place between two distinct lives. The two became one. Has not the Lord made them one? In flesh and spirit, they are his. And why one? Because he was seeking godly offspring. Very, very cool. Malachi 2:15. And really, this is about where we got to in the class, the live class. And so the next few slides you may see again in the next video. And so you can fast forward these now, or you can fast forward in the next video when that is up. But from a book called The Marriage Improvement Project, we get 6 ideas here that will help in marriage. And these not just concerning intimacy, but concerning every single aspect of marriage. Number 1, intentionality is key. Nothing important in your life happens by accident. There is not a healthy relationship in the world They got that way without purpose and determination. Your marriage will be no different. How true. Have a vision and do your part to move the relationship in that direction. Keeping your marriage at the top of the priority list will require diligence. Those days that you don't feel like putting in the effort, you must draw on the strength of the Holy Spirit. You must draw on the strength the Holy Spirit provides and make the effort anyway. You'll be amazed at what he does through that kind of obedient, dependent attitude. Number 3, the dedication required to keep your marriage top priority will require time. There's no way around it. Continue making room in your schedule for each other so that your marriage can be what it is intended to be. When Jennifer and I had, I think when all 3 of our kids were under 10 years old, that would have been part of the time we did this. I can't remember exactly when we started, but we bought tickets to the Nashville Symphony Orchestra. And so it's about 4, maybe 6 times a year, automatic date to see the symphony. They had a subscription thing also in Nashville where Broadway across America. We stopped doing that after a while just because we decided it would be better for us just to pick and choose various productions to go to. But for a while there was a subscription to that. And so 6 times a year, an automatic date to go see a show and things like that. We've got to just kind of sometimes, especially with little kids, we just have to force some alone time, some time where in my case, Jennifer and I could just have some time with ourselves. Really, really important. And it doesn't have to be a ton, but just, every now and then, maybe 6 times a year, maybe 12 if you can do it. Once a month would be great. But during those times where the kids are little and things are total chaos, it's still worth dedicating some time to the marriage. Of course, that is a true statement. So, number 4, at times your commitment to a strong and healthy marriage will require self-sacrifice. I would say all the time it does. Your own desires and wants will have to take a back seat to your marriage, and that's how it should be. And you know what? They take a back seat to your children for stretches of time. That's just the way life is. And then things shift and things move, and we go through different stages of life. But there are times where the kids do need to be number 1, and that's okay. And people deal with all sorts of different things. Commitment, notice that word right there, commitment to a strong and healthy marriage is the key. Are you committed to it or not? If you're committed to it, no matter what's required, you'll make it happen. It's kind of like our faith. No matter what we need to do, we're going to stay committed to Christ. We're not going to let that fall apart. So no matter what it takes, we make it happen. 5th, don't wait on your spouse to take the first steps in improvement. Before the Lord, you are responsible to do what is right, regardless of what your spouse does. In order to stay focused on your marriage, you'll have to periodically review your attitude, schedule, lifestyle, and many other things to see if anything is out of adjustment. Do this regularly together so that both of you can understand the needs and heart of the other. And then finally, and most importantly, Carrie Green says, you will need the Lord's help. Ask the Lord to help you day by day as you endeavor to remain focused on doing your part to maintain a strong and healthy marriage. Said another way, don't take your marriage for granted. Make your marriage a daily prayer request. Jennifer and I, we never fail to pray for our children. When we're together at a meal, prayer, wherever, we probably need to pray for each other more. I know we do individually, but even when we're together, just pray for our marriage to be stronger and better and a light in this world. When I do weddings, I pray a prayer from the Book of Common Prayer, typically, and it includes the idea that a couple's love will be a sign and light to the world of Christ's love. And that's what we should want in our marriages as well. Well, today we did a brief intro. We looked at this idea of intimacy. Next week, Jason Hoeflich will be teaching for us on March 12th, and he will be teaching on love. May the Lord bless us in our marriages. May we continue to work hard to make them better. God bless you.